So I got to bring on our very good friend Stephen Yates on this issue. Our very good friend, you guys know him. You find him on X at Yates Comms, but he's also senior fellow at America First Policy Institute and chair of the China Policy Initiative. All right, so Stephen, I don't think that I would want to pick a fight with some plucky a Filipino fisherman at sea if I were the Chinese Coast Guard or Navy or whatever that is. But the gist of it is that they were out. They were out on waters that they could be out on, regardless of what, I don't care what they were doing, setting off fireworks, fishing, or whatever. And China was saying that they were in their waters trying to cause trouble. And that doesn't seem to be the case at all when you consider how far away they actually were from the Chinese coast.
Oh, this is a part of a piece where the Chinese have been very, very aggressive about this. It is basically all the way to the Philippines' territorial waters. They have their extended economic zones under the UN theory that say call international law the law of the sea, but I call it a theory because everything's an idea unless it's enforced.
Hmm.
And so it's probably technically true that we wouldn't want to go to war because someone's being a jerk on the high seas. But if they start killing people,
Hmm.
we do have a treaty with
Yeah.
the Philippines. And so I think that the government of the Philippines was trying to be more grown up than the leadership of China has been, where they're basically saying, yeah, these people are jerks, they're belligerents, we don't like it. We're not going to accept it, but we're not trying to threaten war or escalation over this. They're trying to cool things down. But there's no real ambiguity. This isn't Chinese water, and these are not what we would call professional exercises by the
Yeah.
Chinese, whatever they are.
I was, because they have the video and it's pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
And they were apparently playing, they were strobe lights, they had wooden boats, they were hitting their wooden boats. And then the guys because it was Chinese, this is after Chinese forces also injured, what is it, Filipino Navy and some other military personnel. So, I mean, they were like facing off. They were blaring sirens, they had the strobe lights, they were hitting their boats, they were arguing, yelling, all this stuff, go back to Philippines, etc. The claim that China was trying to make is that there's some sort of ship that's run aground and that the Philippines government is trying to keep it from sinking so that they can lay claim to whatever. But Stephen, it's so far away from China. How in the
Yeah.
world is that considered their territorial waters?
Yeah, it isn't. And basically, every sensible government around the world should be calling them what they are. They're international toddlers. They're throwing tantrums, throwing food, and throwing cutlery, and they should be treated with no more respect than
Literally.
you would an out of control toddler.
Yeah, and that's literally what he's not joking. Like they're literally doing this. This is actually what they were doing. So China sent 66 military aircraft into Taiwan over 2 days, and then now we have the German vice chancellor warning China of some consequences. Not really so much on that, but on their Russia stance. It's weird how they get mad over their stance on Russia, but they kind of overlook the treatment that they have towards all of these other nations in the South Seas.
Yeah, they're very willing to sacrifice everybody that isn't in their immediate abroad or within their own boundaries. And they do seem to talk high church when it comes to Russia, but really only on some things. They still are okay doing some deals now and then.
Right.
But when it comes to China, it seems far away and it's opportunity land to them. And they're very dependent on China, as are we in some ways that don't make sense anymore. But they talk a good game every once in a while, but it's not consistent. And yeah, when it comes to places like Taiwan, they act as if, well, who needs them? Well, it turns out they need them as much as almost anywhere else in the world does, at least for semiconductors, but also a lot of other things too. And you'd think that never again. I think that kind of came out of an experience in Germany and ought to apply to other people that don't deserve to be mowed down by genocidal regimes.
Yeah. In this, we're talking with our good friend Stephen Yates. You can find him on X at YatesComs. Apparently, they have a trade dispute, as how it was reported by the AP. Tariffs on cheap Chinese electric cars,
Yep.
and they were asking China to take the European Commission's findings. They've been looking at EVs and all this stuff seriously, and then China said that they're going to. They're announcing an anti-dumping investigation into imported products from the EU involving pork and buy. So they're picking. So now the EU and China look like they're fighting, which I'm going to be honest, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but I mean, if your appeal is I'm going to get my lawyers involved, the Chinese are going to sneeze that away pretty quick. And so, I mean, really, there's been a lot of dumping that's gone on from China's market. And you and I have talked about this for a long time
Hmm.
on the EV market, regardless of whether you want to pray to the Most High Sun God and think you're going to save the planet by going down this road. There's the pure economics of it, where this literally destroys critical supply chains in Eastern Europe. You make yourself overwhelmingly dependent on China, and they don't exactly respect labor, environmental, and other standards you say that you want to protest others about. So, I mean, this is not something that snuck up on the German government. It's kind of late for them to be ringing the alarm, but they're not wrong that this is a problem at this point. It's just like, where you been?
Yeah, I kind of like that their deputy. It was Germany's Habeck. I like the fact that he was over there telling them to their face, expect competition, expect this, expect that. Because I was a little nervous, I got to be honest, and I think we've touched on it before, but it seemed, as particularly pre-pandemic, that a lot of our allies in Europe they didn't share our animosity or our suspicion of China. And I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, I remember when it was Britain that was entertaining the idea of doing the Huawei and all the 5G stuff until Boris Johnson pulled it, and some of the other conservatives over there. They were getting pretty chummy with China. Is it just COVID that changed all that, or is there? I mean, I would imagine that the competition and maybe with some of the EV stuff has done it, but it seemed like they were trying to do a European Belt and Road version.
Yeah, well, I think with Germany, the EVs kind of went over the top for them. It's kind of odd what is sort of the last straw for
Yeah.
various countries because the Chinese under Xi Jinping have given people a lot of different reasons. For some people, maybe incarcerating and trying to harvest organs from the Muslim minority would be the no-go zone, but not everybody, apparently. For others, mowing down democracy in Hong Kong would have been it. Threatening global security in any number of different
Yeah.
ways. But certainly the pandemic has been difficult. And I think maybe we've come around the bend to take the mind warping politics out of COVID to see, yeah, it did come from China. It very likely did come from a lab. And unambiguously, they lied about it and exported it. And it cost people tons. And so, I mean, that is getting less and less arguable as time passes. So maybe that is the sobriety checkpoint that we finally crossed.
Why are so many nations afraid to entertain the idea that maybe it was biological warfare? I mean, they won't even breach the topic.
You know, I can only think that it's the intoxication known as the green sugar of money. And so there's just a huge aversion to accept the truth that is right before you when you're very dependent. And this is very good for parts of your economy or parts of your community. But this is something that, frankly, a lot of us saw immediately when it was breaking out. There's a lot of unknowns when it came to COVID. But what we did know is basically where it came from, because in the months prior, there were these people wearing hazmat suits, blowing all kinds of weird stuff around Wuhan as if it was a 1950s pesticide commercial. So, I
Yes.
mean, you knew something was way off and you knew where it was coming from.
Yeah, we all knew. We all knew. Last question. Well, last kind of area of discussion for you. The Russian submarines that have, and the what is it? The some of the ships that have been down there in Cuba. Are you worried about that at all? Are you worried? Because I know that China's been trying to make inroads, and there's been a relationship blossoming there. Of course, they've been trying to get into South America as well, Central and South America. Is that something that I mean? I don't think that we're in like the '60s again, but it is a little unnerving.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to see it, but I mean, really, if you're concerned about security in that part of our near abroad, and I am, we'd want to pay attention to where the largest foreign embassy in the world is, and it belongs to the People's Republic of China. It's in the Bahamas, and so I
What?
mean, really, that's
What?
not a submarine that comes and goes. That's a permanent observation deck.
I'm
And
googling
so,
right
you know,
now.
we've got all kinds of stuff going on there. And yeah, I mean, we've been distracted. We want to think that these things don't matter. We don't pay attention to building enough ships and submarines. We play around with nuclear power as if it doesn't matter. It's actually vital to us and to our seafaring navy. And so hopefully we'll wise up to this. But the Chinese and the Russians are going to poke us if we are going to let them, or we're not going to do anything about it. So I think that's basically a nice little middle finger coming from our south.
Speaking of that little middle finger, the biggest embassy you just said in the Bahamas. Why the Bahamas? Just because of
Close.
its
Yeah. So I mean, look, we have Central Command and Special Operations Command in Florida. And so, I mean, there's major sea lines that go through that area. It's an extremely advantageous place. And it has sort of approximate distances, sort of similar to what Taiwan is to mainland China. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are serious and unserious about that location. But the fact of the matter is, it's the largest diplomatic facility on the planet, not just of the Chinese, of anyone.
That's actually super creepy. So, maybe just one like okay, now one last question, maybe. Just asking for a friend. Like, would you tell them not to go to the Bahamas now that we know that the big old commie embassy is right there, probably in Nassau?
Well, who knows what kind of vibrations you're going to get from the
Oh my
telecommunications towers
gosh!
coming out of all of that. I mean, you might want to tighten up your tinfoil hat to insulate your brain
I'm gonna wrap my whole
when going
head
on the
in
next.
Reynolds. That's what's gonna happen.
Well,
I already.
I mean,
I'm already looking at photos of it. Like he's talking. I'm like, what? I'm immediately googling this. Stephen Yates with a
problem
nightmare
is
fuel
they're
for
already
all of us.
here.
Good heavens. Yeah, I think maybe have to redo some things maybe this summer. Just saying out loud. Stephen Yates, always appreciate it. At Yates Comms, Nightmare Fuel. Great. Happy Monday, everybody. There you go, right there. Thank you, my friend. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.